Hello, welcome to the Points lecture series on social issues. In this video, we'll be talking about the social structure in India, the characteristic features of Indian society, and this will be the part 1 of this series on the characteristic features of Indian society. In this video, we'll be majorly talking about the idea of caste and how it has actually shaped the social structure in our country. We will actually take this forward from where we have left in the introductory lecture. So, when one says there are certain elements which characterize an Indian society, what are those elements? We are trying to understand that. So, as you can see, whenever sociologists try to sum up or describe the characteristic features of Indian society, these are the usual parameters that these sociologists associate with the idea of an Indian society. Let us briefly have an introduction about each of these parameters. Multi-ethnic society. Now, ethnicity refers to race. Now, races are segregated based on their genetic makeup. So, you can see that people in the northeast, people in the north, and people in the south are completely different. So that is what multi-ethnicity means in this context. Multilingual is self-explanatory that there are so many languages, and language being such an emotional issue, that is also an essential part of our Indian society. Multi-class society. Now, what do you understand by the concept of class? Generally, in sociology, class is a set of people with certain common characteristics. And most of the times these characteristics are either due to financial or social conditions. Class conflict as well as caste conflict. These are some of the recurrent themes which we'll be looking in sociology and Indian society in particular. So we'll be talking about patriarchal society in the chapter on gender issues. Basically, just to introduce this idea, patriarchal society means a kind of a society where male has a higher power in decision making in the society, and the decision maker of a family, even within the family, the elder male has a peculiar role where his decision would be final. So this would amount to little freedom to the females in the family, and such a society is called patriarchal society. Now, when there is so much of diversity in different parameters, as you've seen in all this, the next aspect is unity in diversity. Despite so much diversity, India still has that national consciousness. So, what does this mean? Despite the fact that we have different races, different languages, there are certain commonalities. Now, these commonalities will actually bind us together and create a peculiar feature of Indian society where you exhibit unity in diversity. Now, the next one is coexistence of traditionalism and modernity. Just to put things into context, what do you mean by traditionalism? It means that you are trying to uphold the core values that you are brought up with. So, a person who is raised in a vegetarian family, despite moving to the new urban spaces from villages where he is raised, he will adopt all the modern features. He will adopt the modern features like rational thinking, socializing, scientific and technological progress, but at the same time he will retain certain core values which are based on tradition. So the coexistence of traditionalism and modernity is yet another feature. Similarly, one might aspire for riches or wealth, that is materialism, and yet Indian society has traditionally been in search of moksha, which is considered to be one of the 4 purusharthas, which we have discussed in the previous video. So spiritualism and materialism coexist. Now the next one is individualism and collectivism. Individualism is all about liberty. You are free to do whatever you want. But when you are living in a society, you have to respect the collective beliefs of that particular group. Say for example, you are an atheist. But when you are in a group which has certain religious beliefs, as long as they are rational, there is absolutely no necessity to disrespect their belief. So you kind of give away certain opinions about certain attitudes just to ensure that there is a fine balance between them in society. Naturally, when we are talking about individualism, it is all about self reliance and liberty, or more on a moral, political, and social outlook level rather than simple things like belief in God. So, collectivism is about community rights, individualism is about individual rights. So, our society always has a balance. The next one is blood and kinship ties. Basically, it means that we still have a lot of prominence for blood and kinship relations, and they continue to govern the political and economic spheres of our life. So, these are the characteristic features of Indian society. So, when we're talking about Indian society, the most prominent feature is the basis for our division in the society, and it is called the caste system. What exactly is this caste system? So basically it's a methodology or a structure in traditional Indian society which has certain features with an objective to divide labor. So this is how it started. However, over a period of time, the features of this completely changed. Now what are the features? Unlike the Chaturvarna system, caste system is very rigid because it does not allow social mobility. So, social mobility is something that is completely missing. That is, once a person is born into that family of a particular caste, he will be given that status for the rest of his life, no matter what achievements he achieves in his life. So, characteristic features of caste system means it is hereditary. That is, once a person is born into that family, he is given that caste. It's an endogamous group. That is, a member of a particular caste will always marry within that caste. So, endogamous means within that caste. And they have a common name. The surnames that you see are typically based on caste. And then you have, like, originally they were divided on the basis of the work or profession that they do. So common traditional occupation is very evident. Since they have similar features in their society, the culture is also very common. So like I've already mentioned, it is very rigid in matters of mobility. That, so for example, in a hierarchy, if a caste is at this tier 2, no matter what happens or what achievements that caste members take up, there is no upward or downward movement. So these features are added with some other features like segmental division of society. That is, there is a hierarchy like you can see in this representative picture, and there will be certain disabilities. Like for example, in a traditional Hindu society, the bottommost rung of the ladder of our society, the people who are at this place, they were not allowed entry into temples. So this is one of the disability that was imposed on them. Now when you talk about civil disability, like they were not allowed to use certain common public properties like water tanks. That is civil disability. Endogamy means, we've already discussed, within that caste group they marry. Untouchability. So even below this, what is perceived to be the lowermost caste, if intercaste marriages, that is exogamous marriages happen, then those particular people were ostracized from traditional society and they were treated as untouchables. So that is how the concept of untouchability came into existence as a punishment against not ascribing to the caste norms. Manual scavenging means these people were subjected to inhuman treatment of cleaning the human defecation of these caste groups, the upper caste groups. So as a result, it even resulted in caste-based violence in our country across the history. like we already mentioned, this concept of untouchability is probably the lowest form of casteism, or the worst form of casteism, where it is based on the idea of concept of purity and pollution. So these people, like you can see, after the top caste, these people were treated as untouchable because of their decision to marry outside their caste, and they were treated for generations together as untouchables or antyajas. And this practice continued even till recent times. So the people who married out of this caste traditionally created a new class of caste, and they have continued, and they were subjected to inhuman treatments for as long as 1950s. And sometimes it is even witnessed in rural areas in the present times also. However, because of the political struggles, or because of the ideals that were laid down in the constitution after our independence movement, when Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was drafting the constitution in 1946 till 1950, when India became a republic eventually, these formative years laid down the roadmap for how the post-independent India would perceive caste as a social structure. So because of the constitutional provisions, if not immediately, slowly over a period of time, in the last 7 decades, we have seen significant changes in the caste system. We don't see that traditional elements which were there in the pre-independent era. Now, what are the reasons? Firstly, intercaste marriages. Just like in Western countries, where if two people like each other, this incidence of intercaste marriages has significantly increased, especially after the 1991 LPG reforms, because it is giving them certain economic freedom. Now, you have to remember that caste is essentially a division of labor, and when you are not following your traditional occupations, there is no point in actually sticking to the caste system unless and until you have an incentive, whether politically or economically. So that is one reason. Similarly, orthodox practices of the caste system, right from the 19th century, the Brahmins of Bengal, like Rajaram Mohan Rai or all the social reformers of the 20th century, they felt that the practices that were existing in the society needs to be challenged. So that is how the inhuman practices which were plaguing the Sanatana Dharma, or the ancient view of Hinduism, or rather a distorted view of Hinduism, which was very prevalent in the feudalistic medieval ages, that is the sati. That practice was completely abolished because of the changes. We have had new food habits, we have had interactions with different cultures, intermingling of cultures. Again, because of the economic reforms, like we have seen in the case of 1991, there is occupational mobility. That is, there is absolutely no entry barrier because of the issue of caste, and this is also what was laid down in Article 15. Also, the state's affirmative action in the form of reservations, that also ensured that the people in this caste did not have any issues with occupational mobility. That resulted in the relative position of the lower caste people, and especially after the 1990, when the Mandal Commission report came out and 27% reservation was granted after the 1992 Indira Sawhney case, the position of what we know today as the other backward castes or OBCs has definitely increased. So this is the history of the changes in our caste system. Now, at the same time, you have to understand what are the factors which brought about the changes in caste system. Traditionally, before 1947, when there was absolutely no concept of reservation at that particular point of time, the lower caste tried to emulate the practices of the higher caste, and the objective behind doing this is to gain respect. They were actually mimicking the practices that were followed by higher caste. That concept is called Sunscreenization. So the good thing about this practice is, through this practice in certain castes, in certain regions, alcohol was completely taken out of that society. So the value of teetotalism was actually propagated by lower caste just to claim the higher position in the caste hierarchy. So the evil of alcohol abuse was taken away in certain regions. However, they did not get the same kind of treatment elsewhere. Apart from that important factor of the traditional feature, which is Sanskritization, which was observed in the traditional Indian society, we have certain other factors in the recent times. Like, say for example, Westernization and modernization. Now, to a commoner, both these terms will look similar. The difference is Westernization means materialistically, when we're talking about materialism, we are trying to mimic the patterns that were adopted by the West in generating wealth. So if you take a look at the economic models, the kind of fast food joints, etc., which were basically adopted from the Western lifestyle, that is Westernization. We are just trying to mimic, just like how lower castes have mimicked the higher castes. We perceive that the Western societies are much more progressive and try to adapt the values that they cherish. So that is Westernization. But when you talk about modernization, it's all about rationalism or rational thinking, scientific temper, not believing in anything just because someone told you, not believing in rumors, and a balanced rational approach towards anything. So these factors mentally shaped up the attitudes towards caste systems. Similarly, industrialization and urbanization forced people out of rural areas, and because these people were moving out of rural areas, they gained more and more access to employment opportunities. So what this has actually led to is growth of cities, and in cities, these boundaries which were based on traditional caste structures, as you can see in rural areas or villages, they stop to exist in cities because there is no incentive for anyone. Everybody is busy in their own life. Similarly, when we are talking about the role played by politics, the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts, which were brought out in 1992 to empower the local panchayats or the local bodies. Within those acts, SC, ST women were given reservation, which improved their position. So that also changed the attitude towards caste system. Finally, when we're talking about caste in politics, we have seen how the Dalit identity has actually played a significant factor in northern and central Indian politics. So this mobilization based on the caste, or the casteization of politics as it is called in sociology, is another factor which resulted in this change. Finally, there were certain legislative measures against the discrimination that is meted out to SCs and STs through acts like Untouchability Offences Act 1955. We have tried to dismantle the traditional or the inhuman practices associated with the caste system. So this is the first part of the video. We will be continuing further from this point. Thank you.